Hi everyone, my name is Moses Mathini, Head of Private Wealth and Legal here at Liaison Group, and this is the Impact Diaries, a special series by Liaison Group. Today I'm joined by Preeyanka Shah, COO and co-founder of Avocap. I'll allow her to introduce herself as well.
Hi everyone, I'm Preeyanka Shah. I am the co-founder and CEO and head of family office at Impact Asset Managers, and thank you for having me.
I believe that wealth in the traditional sense, it can be understood as finances, but in my personal opinion, that is just one layer of wealth. Wealth can mean freedom and in terms of time. Do you have the time to do your own thing? Do you have the health, the necessary health to actually achieve whatever it is that you want to do? And also, do you have the relevant connections or social capital? So even people who do not necessarily have the financial capabilities can also have great networks that also can contribute to their wealth in a meaningful way. So it's not just from a financial point of view or an economic point of view. It can also transcend that.
I think the distinction lies in the moment your money is not dependent on your time. And what I mean by that is, let's say, if your lifestyle is very dependent on your efforts, like your salary, your business, etc., then in that case you're earning. But when your lifestyle stops, when your lifestyle doesn't stop, even though your income does, then because you have assets, you have investments that protect you, that's when you start building wealth.
Earning wealth and structuring wealth are totally two different objectives. Now, when it comes to earning, it's more about inflow, cash inflow. Structuring wealth is once you've accumulated this particular wealth, what happens after? You can look at it in terms of, at the end of the day, there is no problem when it comes to Kenyans to earn money. But how do we accumulate? How do we create generational wealth? Generational wealth doesn't happen just in one fall swoop. It actually happens over time, gradually. But there has to be systems that actually enable this thing to happen. So a key thing is in terms of structure. Structure follows strategy. You have first of all to understand what is it that I want to achieve. And then after that is when now you form the system. A good system can be through a trust and can be through other means as well.
Yeah, that's a good question, and I actually think it's earlier than you think. I believe it needs to be done before complexities arrive and not after. And there is this notion that it's only for the ultra high net worth to structure wealth, and by structuring wealth we mean putting systems in place so that it goes through generations in a efficient way. But I feel like it becomes relevant when income starts becoming predictable, your investments start accumulating, your responsibilities start increasing in your family, where you now have a whole other generation to take care of. And then in that case, it doesn't just become about the growth of your investments, it then moves to protection, clarity, and continuity. At Arvocap, how we actually do such key allocations is when we start by looking at the investor and not the product. So we start by looking at their goal. What is it they want? Do they want a comfortable retirement? Do they want to build generational wealth? Do they want long-term growth? After that, we look at their risk appetite. Does it match with kind of what we are going to recommend to them? For instance, if they want long-term growth, in which case, it would be good to invest in equities and multi-asset strategy funds. But are they willing to bite the volatility in the market when that happens? And that's what then we use to profile the client. After that, we look at time horizon, where we wouldn't want short-term goals sitting in long-term investments and things like that. And then currency exposure needs is a big thing, where let's say one of the clients' goal is to save for their child's education and they're going to the US. In that case, start saving in dollars and in the currency that you're going to spend it in. So these are just some of the key things we look at, the main things we look at when designing a portfolio.
Actually, we deal with both clients, both types of clients, and we welcome all of them. For us, it's not the individual who sits in front of us as a client, it's the entire family. That's why we are a multi-family office, and we take that particular mindset. As you can appreciate, many families, family members differ in terms of financial literacy. So we have to create awareness and educate the family members. Now, at the end of the day, we have to educate them in terms of what are the investment options that they have, what are the goals that they want to achieve, and also in terms of what are the responsibilities and how are they looking at in terms of what they want to achieve in the future. So at the end of the day, everybody is at the same level, and we create a system where even the ones who are trailing behind are not left far behind. The system takes care of everybody. For this one, this is why we do encourage a co-governance structure with the family. You cannot manage it alone. The family has to be involved. They have to have unity of purpose. They have to have the same value system to understand where exactly do they want to go socio-economically. Now, for us, as we take care of their assets, we just make sure that their assets are aligned to their goals, their future goals, and also generations to come. So at the end of the day, the future beneficiaries of the family also have to be sort of indoctrinated into the process of how the family actually operates as a financial unit. First and foremost, it's discipline and conscious financial expenditure. You know, at the end of the day, if without conscious expenditure, you cannot have savings. Without savings, you cannot have investments. Without investments, you cannot have passive income and freedom. So at the end of the day, it is those small habits that have to be instilled early on so that they can build up when you are growing as a family unit financially. So in terms of also value system, all family members need to be on the same page again, because very many people, you could have accumulated wealth as an individual, but if your sibling is not doing quite well or a family member is not doing quite well, there's a famous saying that you're one hospital bill away from being wiped out. So we need to make sure that everybody is well set up and everybody has structure.
Some of the mistakes people actually make is one, chasing returns. They don't think of the goal that they have. They just want to, they think of the return that they're going to get without thinking, it's typically high risk, high return kind of situations. And so without actually looking at their risk profile or things like that, they look at the return and they chase that return. Second thing I think would be over concentration on one single asset class, for example, only equities. And in this economy and happening right now, it's very volatile. And so diversification is key. Or one currency, for example. Another thing is they mix timelines and they put short-term goals that need liquidity in long-term investments. And so it's not ideal for them to pull out in between. But I think finally, the most important thing is they seek advice too late. They have share portfolios that they've created, but it's only once, they lose value in it, is when they start looking for professionals to actually help them. These are some of the mistakes, but I think key is whatever you do, you have to have a structure behind it. You have to have succession planning frameworks. You have to have a trust. You have to think of how it's going to move to the next generation. I think that's one of the big mistakes.
I second what Preeyanka is saying in terms of structure and in terms of longevity. Many people only think about the present generation, their present needs. So you find even their consumption is excessive. They do not actually consider in terms of sustainability. In as much as we are earning a lot of money, are we actually having this sustainable habits to actually invest? Are we teaching the same values? Are we passing on the same values? It's not a matter of just passing on money. And that, I think, is a problem in Africa generally. We are so worried about passing money to the immediate generation as opposed to in terms of passing values. So value system is something that is a weak point and should actually be encouraged. This is achieved through having financially related conversations in the family. The problem is speaking about money in African homes is sort of like a taboo, and we need to move away from that. Children need to understand how is money made. Also, parents need to actually have this in terms of meetings and even approach them in a way that is meaningful and fun. Money should not be a very serious topic. I think there are very many ways you can teach someone in terms of savings, in terms of investments, and also going to places and events whereby they're actually talking about empowerment. So these are the many ways. There are resources out there, and we want to encourage Kenyans and Kenyan families to actually reach out to these resources and get empowered. First and foremost, I would like to encourage Kenyans to adopt the perspective of consulting professionals and not just self-medicating themselves financially. At the end of the day, get yourself a financial advisor, get yourself a professional trustee, people who can guide you, because you do not have the monopoly of financial knowledge. Again, you cannot do everything yourself. You have to balance between growth and also sustainability. In terms of risk mitigation, you need to think of diversification. You also need to look at asset sizing as well, allocation sizing. So at the end of the day, there are means for you to mitigate. You cannot eliminate risk. The whole idea is how can I mitigate and what are the structures that are needed? And a trust has that ecosystem. You have trustees, you have investment advisors, you have people who can assist you in capital raising. You're not alone. The problem is a majority of Kenyans and Kenyan families, they try to figure all these things out alone, and not all information on the internet is accurate or is applicable to your personal situation. Somebody who has done the time and understood the discipline in these fields will assist you in a very more efficient way, and you'll avoid making so many rookie mistakes early on.
I think it boils down to also what Moses is talking about in terms of seeking advice from professionals. As much as AI is great and it would advise you, wealth is very personal. Wealth is your own perspective. Growing it is very personal. So seeking advice from a financial professional, such as an investment manager or such, would really be helpful, because they sit with you, they understand what your goals are, they understand your risk, they understand what kind of product suits you. There's this thing where if my friend has invested in this, I must too, but it doesn't always match. And I think that's a key distinction.
Yes, I would. Actually, thanks to the amendments that we successfully lobbied in 2021 and 2023, it updated the laws to the 21st century. Previously, before those amendments, incorporating a trust would take you 7 months plus. Right now, it takes you roughly around 2 weeks or 14 working days. Also, in terms of the bureaucracy that pre-existed at the time, right now it's only the registrar of trusts who is in charge of incorporating a trust. Previously, there was a two-tier approach. You had, first of all, to approach for registration the registrar of documents, then petition the minister at the time for incorporation. As you can imagine, that created an atmosphere where people were being taken advantage of by middlemen. Also, it became economically exclusive to the elite, because when you have to pay to get service in government, people now inflate prices. At the end of the day, maybe this is one of the possible solutions, possible reasons as to why people actually opted for wills instead of trusts. But right now, that tide is changing. We can incorporate trust within record time. The space has really been democratized. That is our objective, is to actually, as Liaison Wealth, make sure as many Kenyan families as possible have access to this particular instrument and at an affordable cost. You don't have to break the bank for you to incorporate and operate a trust. It is accessible to everyone. The easiest way to understand a family trust, it is a vehicle. It is an instrument whereby you can put all your assets in, you can consolidate them, and at the end of the day, you get to manage in terms of who gets to benefit from these assets. And in other words, these are now beneficiaries. When do they get to benefit? How do they get to benefit? And to what extent they get to benefit? The best advantage is that when you put your assets in a trust, you get to dictate as many rules as possible, as opposed to if you were to distribute it through a will. The downside of using a will is that you cannot put preconditions in terms of how someone was to use this particular asset. Once you bequeath them, they're free to use it as they wish. And this is something that has plagued many African families in terms of sustainability of what was there. Now, there is a statistic that 70% of a family's wealth is actually depleted in the second generation, and 90% is depleted in the third. So you find many African families, although they do not have a problem in terms of gaining wealth and accumulating, they have a problem in terms of retaining the wealth. And in Kenya, we have so many examples of business empires that actually went down in 1 year after the patriarch or the matriarch exited. So this is just some of the things that we want to highlight in the market and assist Kenyans to understand. Yes. So in terms of trust, also to just add on, in terms of governance, there are people like trustees who can assist you to manage the property. Again, in the absence of you when you're no longer there, you can appoint enforcers. And also these enforcers, their work is to just basically balance the power of the trustees so that they may not be in a position to even abuse their power. The amendments actually do encourage co-governance or involvement and transparency, which brings transparency and accountability in the governance structure of the trust. And at the end of the day, of course, you have beneficiaries. Beneficiaries do not necessarily have to be your direct related relatives. They can be anyone. They can even be an organization if you want to pursue charitable purposes.
What Moses said is spot on, and one of the examples of it is, let's say there's this amount that was earmarked for education, and the next generation, whoever it was earmarked for, does not take that up, does not want to go to uni, etc. But they can't still take out that payout because it's meant for education, and so the next generation after that would be educated. And that's what it means by creating that structure around it and using it in the right way. I think a well-coordinated investment system would have different tools for different purposes. For example, short-term needs require liquidity. Income generating requires stability. Future growth requires growth assets. And finally, succession planning requires the trust. So it boils down to having the right tool for the right purpose and then protecting that in a structure.
For this one, it brings me back to my earlier statement, whereby strategy should also structure should follow strategy, because if you do not have structure, the strategy becomes an idea. If you do not have strategy, the structure becomes paperwork. At the end of the day, when you put in measures, what do you want to achieve? When you start from a goal-oriented perspective, then you start trying to analyze what do you want this trust to achieve. So for many Kenyan families, they need to break it down from the present towards the future.
Yeah, I really liked when you said it's not just about passing wealth, it's about passing values. And that's exactly right. It starts early with the generation, have them, expose them to all these kind of ideas, perspectives, have their own perspectives, give them some responsibilities, see how they take care of it. And this cultivates kind of alignment when it comes to wealth, when it comes to building it, your goals as a family. And that once it's instilled at a very young age, they then pass that on to the next generation as well. And I think that's one of the gaps here, is that financial education given to children earlier, and creating their own value system that actually aligns with their families. And I think it starts there. And when then it progresses, everyone is aligned, everyone has the same goal, everyone is kind of thinking on the same track, and that avoids all these problems.
From our initial meetings, we educate the client that it's not just them who is our client. All our clients are client families. So in the event, for example, they have a spouse, we encourage them to bring their spouse in the subsequent meeting. Also, we have mechanisms in terms of client onboarding, whereby we meet the beneficiaries, we meet the enforcers, and also we try and meet other dependents of these particular individuals. At the end of the day, there is a holistic education whereby everybody understands their rights, duties, and obligation. And also we try and assist especially the adults in the family to understand how do they operate as a financial unit, where are their vulnerable areas, and also we try to strengthen them economically. If they have businesses, we see if they are in need of capital raising, and also we see how can we best improve their social demographic outlook.
There are quite a lot that we will see in the next decade, and it's taking shape now. And one is the succession planning in terms of trusts. I mean, I think the notion of it's only for the wealthy or for that certain elite is going away. There's more information, there's more knowledge about what the trust does for you and why you need to have it. And so I think in the next decade, we'll see a lot of that, people moving to that kind of family office structure. On the wealth side, from where I sit, I see a lot of young investors now investing. And I truly believe that they have a different perspective on actually growing wealth than the previous generation had. And this is smart decisions, getting knowledge, getting equipped with with everything that you need to know to be able to make the right decisions. The world is also getting smaller in terms of you can now invest in global markets with very little, even in terms of the minimum amounts, in terms of the platforms given to you. And so we're seeing a lot of global diversification as well. We're seeing a lot of use of tech in coming up, where people want transparency and people want access. These are some of the things that I see shifts happening in the next decade.
I believe wealth management has been democratized by the current legal framework and the amendments that we actually lobbied successfully for. And it's up to Kenyans to sort of seek out this particular information. When it comes to family trusts, it is the most ideal vehicle for families to safeguard their wealth, safeguard it from external threats and also internal threats. At the end of the day, Africa, we have great potential. We can accumulate wealth, but our struggle is retaining it. And so at the end of the day, that is our mission. We take a multi-generational aspect when it comes to building wealth. At the end of the day, it's all about sustainability and security. So that is our mission, and that is what we hope to achieve.
Yeah, I think it's important to get educated about what structures work for you and why certain traditional structures would not. You need to understand the risks involved in both, and make wiser and smarter decisions, because it's not just your generation, it's the generation after and the generation after that you need to think about, especially if you're going to build generational wealth. It's important to think about how that will be passed on in a way that passes down your wealth and your values as well.